Hi everyone, my name is Rawzatul Faradisa. Now, I'm studying at Syokpala University, majoring in mathematics education. In this video, we're going to cover the basics of inequalities, how to represent inequalities on a number line, and also how to solve inequalities. So we'll take a look at what all the different symbols mean. Then how to represent inequalities on a number line. Let's start with the symbols. If we look at this expression, it means that x is less than 10. So x could be 9 or 8 or 3 or negative 4, basically anything that's less than 10. Whereas if we had this expression, this one means that x is more than 10, so a number like 11, 12, 50 or 200. The thing that students normally find hardest about this topic, though, is just remembering which symbols which. So one way that might help you remember it is remember that the less than sign looks a little bit like an L, so L for less than. And if you can remember that, you know that the other sign, which doesn't look like an L, must be the more than sign. The next thing we need to look at are these two symbols, which look pretty much the same as a less than and more than signs, except they also have these horizontal lines underneath them. The straight lines basically mean or equal to. So this first expression means that x is less than or equal to 10. So as well as being numbers like 9, 8, 3, or negative 4, x could also be 10 itself. Similarly, the second expression means that x is more than or equal to 10. So again, the number might be 10 itself or any number bigger than 10. Another important thing to know is that when we take an expression like x is less than 10, that means exactly the same thing as 10 is more than x. In both cases, we're saying that 10 is the bigger value and x is a smaller value. We can also use negative numbers with inequalities. For example, x is less than a negative 5 means that x can be any value smaller than negative 5. For example, negative 5.5, negative 17, negative 100, and so on. Whereas if x was bigger than or equal to negative 5, then it could be negative 5 itself or anything bigger, like negative 2, positive 2, or positive 50. The last thing we need to cover are inequalities like this, which contain more than one inequality sign. The signs were in exactly the same way though. So this one just means that 3 is less than x and that x is less than or equal to 7. Or in other words, x has to be between 3 and 7. So if you were told that x is a whole number, then x must be 4, 5, 6, or 7. Because remember, it can't be 3 itself, because 3 is less than x, but it can be 7 itself. You also need to understand how to represent these inequalities on number lines. So for this one, if we look at this number line of 0 to 10, x must be somewhere in this region between 3 and 7. So we put little circles above the 3 and the 7. The important bit though is that because x can also be equal to 7 itself, we need to color in the circle on the right, which tells us that x can be 7. Whereas because x can't be 3, we leave the circle above 3 empty. Let's have a go at one more. So for this question, we need to show the inequality. Negative 3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 4 on a number line. So if we draw a number line from minus 5 to positive 5, then we can put little circles above the minus 3 and the 4 and join them up with a line. Then the last thing we need to do is check if we need to fill in either of our circles. So because it says that -3 is less than or equal to x, we know that x can be -3 itself. And so we have to fill in the circle above the -3. Whereas because x has to be less than 4, we know that x can't be 4 itself. And so we leave the circle above the 4 empty. Next, we're going to cover how to solve inequalities like this 3. The idea is exactly the same as when we're solving normal equations with an equal sign. So just like how we normally want see the unknown letter by itself on one side of the equation, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here as well. So in this first inequality, x plus 3 is less than 8. To get the x on the left by itself, we're gonna have to subtract 3 from both sides. To find that x is less than 5, and that's it. So essentially we treat the inequality sign as if it's an equal sign, but we don't actually change it to an equal sign. The only important difference they need to know about is that if you multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, then you have to swap the inequality sign around. For example, in the second equation, to get rid of the divide by -2 part, we need to multiply both sides by -2, which will leave us with just the x on the left and -10 on the right. But importantly, because we multiplied by a negative number, we're gonna have to swap our inequality sign around so that it will change from a less than to a more than sign, which leaves us with x is more than -10. The last question here, 7 plus 2x is more than or equal to 13, is a bit trickier because it involves 2 steps. The first thing we're gonna have to do is take away 7 from both sides. To get 2x is more than or equal to 6, and then we have to divide both sides by 2. To get x is more than or equal to 3. And that's it. Let's try a couple more. For this first one, there are 2 different ways that you could do it. One is to subtract 5 from both sides. To get -3x is less than or equal to -15, and then divide both sides by -3 to find that x is more than or equal to 5. And if you didn't notice, we swapped our inequality sign around here because we were dividing by a negative number. Then the second way that we could have done this question would be to add 3x to both sides. To get 5 is less than or equal to -10 plus 3x, then add 10 to both sides to get 15 is less than or equal to 3x. And finally divide both sides by 3 to get 5 is less than or equal to x. And remember, this is exactly the same thing as saying that x is more than or equal to 5 like we got in the first place. In situations like this, it doesn't really matter which way around you do it. Just go with whichever one you feel most comfortable with, or whichever one you think of at the time. For the second question, there are also 2 ways of doing it, because we could to put the x on the left or the right. So the first thing you do is subtract x from both sides. To get 3x plus 7 is more than -4. Then you can subtract 7 from both sides to get 3x is more than -11. And finally divide both sides by 3 to get x is more than -11 over 3. And we can leave our answer like that. We can't simplify -11. Anyway, that's everything for this video, so hope that all made sense. If you enjoyed it, then do give us a like and subscribe. and cheers for watching you.